Yo, what is up, Kings? I hope all is well. Hope you guys are having a great week, wherever you may be, and of course, however you may be listening. I recently saw a compilation video, a fan page, I believe it is, for Andrew Wilson, and I actually think I had seen this discussion when it first occurred. And the clip itself is Andrew Wilson talking with these Protestant Christian women, as is usually the case with the born-again Christian women on some of these podcasts. And it's not really a surprise that it is that way, because these women are just seeking another mean towards validation. They're just seeking another means towards their validation, another avenue to have that. And Christianity really allows them to do it perfectly, because it allows them, in their minds, to have their past completely struck from the record, expunged, like what can happen legally, which I'll circle back to that example, while also simultaneously getting all of the positive portrayals of being a Christian woman. And Andrew gives the example of if you had a son and you had girl A and girl B, and they both are interested in your son, and literally the only difference between the both of them is one of them is a virgin and one of them has 100 guys that they have slept with. Who would you recommend that your son be with? And of course, she dances around the subject and says, the classic women prattle. Well, I don't know what women, or why the past matters and why it should matter. It should, people can change and this and that. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this, especially from a man's perspective. So let me start here, okay? A woman, when she gives that answer, it is totally and completely self-interested, and it is impossible for them to, or nearly impossible for them to empathize and put themselves in the man's shoes in order to give a legitimate response to whether the past matters. They totally have a self-interest in excusing their past, because a lot of these women at one point in time have been total whores. I mean, plain and simple. There's no getting around it. They have slept around. They've had plenty of men's, whatever, down their gullets. I mean, it's really sad, quite frankly. So that's number one, okay? Number two, I want to say that on the topic of whether somebody can change or not, and perhaps I could make this into a separate video, but I'm going to touch upon it. If you guys have seen the show Mad Men, Mad Men is a show about the 1960s and 1960s corporate America, specifically in New York, and the epitome of that time and that world is what they call mad men, men that are in advertising, madmen or ad men. And obviously there's various storylines and various topics that they touch upon within that timeline. And by the way, it seemed like a fucking awesome time to be alive, mind you. Both economically, culturally, so on and so on. Or at least like the 50s going into the 60s. Maybe not the late 60s. But the whole point of the show and the main characters that are within the show is to discuss the topic of whether people can change. Or do they just find a way to become who they already are or who they really were? And what that means is that essentially people are who they are, but throughout their life, they are oftentimes trying to escape who they really are on the inside for whatever reason. Nature versus nurture. And the answer is it's usually a bit of both. Some people it's more so one way, some people it's more so the other. But people throughout their lives don't change. They only become who they are more and more and more as they realize how futile it is to try and change who they are. Personally, I think that is more accurate than believing that people outright do in fact change. Because as human beings, when you take in nature and nurture, your environment when you grew up will not change. It was what it was. Your genes are what they are. They will not change. And as a Christian, as an Orthodox Christian, I believe that we all have an essence, a spiritual makeup of who we are, our essence as a human being. This is what separates us from animals. And within that, you have the capacity to move closer to God or further away from God. But you're not really changing who you are. And who you are might be more inclined to do bad things, so to speak, but you also might be inclined to do both. Now, personally, or good things, personally, I think everybody has the capacity to move closer to God or move away from God. So, like I said, that's a separate thing in and of itself, but suffice it to say, I don't believe that people can ever change their essence. I believe that they can make a conscious decision to move towards God, move closer to God in their actions and things like that. But their essence, more or less, remains the same. So, on the topic of should a woman's body count matter, 1000% a woman's history matters, just like everybody's history matters. Now, women care far less about men sleeping with a lot of women. In fact, oftentimes they actually find it attractive. And there's a biological reason for this. Namely, women are followers. They engage in groupthink. So, if a few women are attracted to a man, woman C is far more likely to be attracted to that same man because of their groupthink. They think to themselves, well, shit, this guy might apparently has something going for him to have these other women be attracted to him. He must be a solid male. But everybody's past matters. Okay, for example, while women would not care as much about a guy pounding out, 50 plus girls, some would. I'm not going to say not every woman would not care. Or I'm not saying every woman would not care. Some would. But the difference is that they care about different aspects of a man's past than the past that men care about. For example, women would care far more if a man had a history of sleeping with other men. Women would care far more about a man who is a, edahile. I'm not going to say the full word because it's YouTube. But that past matters. If you had that past as a man, you darn tootin' women care about that. As Andrew Wilson pointed out, and often points out to these women who say that somebody's past shouldn't matter. For example, if somebody is a murderer, and they go to jail because their behavior and past does indeed matter, should they be released from prison because they became a Christian? Solely because they became a Christian and said that their life has changed? Of course not. Of course not. So when it comes to men and women, they both care about the other's past to different degrees, and I would also argue that women care far more about a man's future than they do about his past, but they still do care. And men definitely care about a woman's past, specifically with regards to their sexual history. And there's biological reasons for this, because men used to not be able to have DNA testing to ensure paternity, that they were the father's or the child's father. Unlike nowadays, but this is a brand new thing that men have been able to test and see if the kid is indeed theirs. And even still, honestly, men still, even to this day, are not able to just carte blanche get a kid tested. There's legalities to it. I'm not sure all the ins and outs of it. I don't know, like, for example, if you as a father are suspicious of the child being yours, could you just randomly grab the kid's hair and go get it maybe. I don't, but I do believe that there is a certain aspect of requiring consent to have your DNA tested. But I'm going to key in on what really matters within, and the whole point on why somebody's history does matter. And kind of what the essence of the argument really is. These women are trying to escape accountability. And while becoming a Christian can definitely start you anew in God's eyes in some regards, God still also holds you accountable as well, still. And this is the difference between, it's a very much a Protestant way of thinking, that you can just declare yourself Christian and that's enough. You could just declare yourself a Christian, but you could go and commit some of the most heinous crimes, the most heinous sins, and it all is fine with God. That's simply not the case. It doesn't make any sense that would be the case. And as a former Protestant, I always was like, that doesn't make sense to me. And so ultimately women, especially these newfound Protestant Christian women, they are trying to ultimately escape accountability. And while you can be forgiven, it doesn't mean that you cannot still live with your mistakes, with your errors. It doesn't cleanse you of the fact that it actually happened. For example, and I already used it, if you killed somebody, yes, if you became Christian, yes, you can be forgiven for that sin. And yes, God can, have you washed away of those errors. But you as a human being, you must live with the error that you made, the mistake that you made. And that's really what this boils down to, is we all have to live with the errors that we make, with the mistakes that we make. Just because we try and lie to ourselves and say that this didn't happen or it wasn't really as bad or whatever the case. No. And in fact, I think that that's the most unhealthy way that you can deal with making mistakes. The proper way to deal with mistakes that you make is to take accountability, say that it was wrong, and own up to the fact that you as a human being are capable of moving against God, moving away from God, and you are capable of depravity, of sin. And that's why I said at the beginning of the video that we all have this capacity. And the error when it comes to all of this is people thinking that human beings are always good or always bad. And that's simply not the case. It's like with war, naive, ignorant people often believe that there's a good side and there's a bad side, which simply is not the case. There's good and bad on both sides, because both sides are capable and able of depths of evil that are just impossible to describe because they're so heinous. And so it's the same thing on an individual level. You are always capable of making these errors and mistakes. And the most healthy thing that you can do is admit this to yourself and admit that you are indeed capable of doing some pretty fucked up things. Even myself, I know, I've been a Christian my whole life, but I've still done some things that I would be am embarrassed to admit that I have done. Things that have shamed my family and things like that. And I'm not obviously, somebody who's done crazy terrible things, but there are things that I'm still not proud of, and I know was a mistake, was a sin. And so for me, because my family has always been big on accountability and things like that, I've always had the mindset of accepting it for what it is, acknowledging it, and living with it. That is what it's all about. And that is the root of this topic, is living with the mistakes that you have made and just trying to be better the next day. Now, on the topic of body count specifically, okay, is it something that is like a total X-outer, because you have a certain body count, therefore nobody can consider you for a relationship? For me, if a woman's I would say my limit is probably 10. And even that is high by some people's standards, but still lower than most. I think the average man would probably, as far as like deep down inside what they would and would not be okay with, I would say probably like 20 would probably be the correct number. Now, what they say they're okay with and what they're really okay with are two different things. Because men get with who they can, women are able to be more selective. Men have sex with who they can have sex with, is how the saying goes. So for me, I think 5 to 10, but nonetheless, whatever your limit is, does a woman having more than that, does that utterly and completely exclude her from the conversation? Yes and no. I mean, you can give that girl a chance, but the problem with dating is you're really only allotted a small sample size in which to gauge whether they truly are a changed person or somebody who has improved their behavior. Because like I said, I don't believe in changing, but that they are better. They're making better decisions, because that's really what it boils down to. And so in dating, you really have a small sample size, so it's really difficult to gauge whether somebody is just kind of doing this for this very short time period, and whether they truly are somebody who has improved their decision making, or are they just doing it for that moment in order to be able to enter into the relationship. And so it's a very tricky situation, I think it really is a case-by-case basis. But for me personally, I would need hard evidence that this woman is doing much better. And she would have to be like so good in other regards to make up for having over 10 bodies. Like I said, I still probably wouldn't do it. And so that's really the problem, and what makes it so difficult for women, and they need to just come to terms with this and stop, sleeping around so much, is in dating is different than an everyday friendship or acquaintanceship. It's much more permanent. It's much more serious. So to ask somebody to be able to just look past and be okay with the errors that you have made in your past is a very difficult thing to do, because you have such a small sample size in which to even see that they have made these changes in the first place. So it absolutely matters. I'm not saying that you cannot, because every man's sexual marketplace value is different. Some of you guys will not simply be able to command a woman that is both hot and a quality woman that has quality feminine skills while also having a low body count. And in this day and age, what I would consider a low body count is anything below 5. And honestly, guys, a lot of girls don't even count one night stands as a body, which is totally a lie. A body is not dependent on whether you are in a relationship with that person or not. It's totally irrelevant. So it's a very interesting topic. I think it's utterly ridiculous that women try and lie and cope in saying that a person's past does not matter. It does. It absolutely does for everybody. And yes, men are far more territorial than women are. They don't, and even women are territorial, but men don't want to know that a woman has allowed multiple other men to experience their most private and precious commodity multiple times over. Men don't like to think about that. It's gross to them, to us rather. So, as a man, do not feel ashamed for valuing that, because it is totally understandable. And what you need to realize is that at the end of the day, any woman who says otherwise is doing so from a completely self-interested position, and therefore should not be taken seriously as far as their opinion on the matter, because they are not men. They are not men. Okay? They are not dating themselves. Men are the ones that have to date them, unless, they're a so-called lesbian. So anyways, guys, that's my thoughts on that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Does body count matter? Anyways, like, comment, share. You guys know the drill. Of course, subscribe. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow and fox our feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. I love you, kings. Christ is King. See you guys next time. Peace.